Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mona's Rants. I am your host, Mona Sheikh. You guys, tomorrow is my birthday, and I wanted to, in celebration of my birthday, I want to celebrate my birthday, but I feel like there is so much conflict in the world, and there's so much pain, and it's constantly being circulated in the news and everywhere you go on the internet. And I felt that it's a really important thing to do to have this conversation with my very good friend, who I've never met, but I feel an affinity to him. He is my Jewish brother from another mother. He resides in Israel. He is a social activist, and we've had some really incredible conversations in the past. And I felt that it would be a really great idea to invite him and get kind of the boots on the ground point of view as to what's happening and what the sentiments are on the Israeli side. And here is my very amazing friend, Adar Weinreb. How are you?
Hey Mona, great to be here.
Man, thank you for being here. What time is it there right now, Adar?
Midnight.
It's midnight. Okay, all right. So it's not like 4 o'clock in the morning like the last time I made you wake up at 4 to stay up in the morning.
No, yeah, definitely better than last time. First of all, happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. It's tomorrow, so I'm happy, but I'm also really sad. Like, I want to celebrate, but I'm like not feeling it because I'm just watching the news and it's breaking my heart.
I want to tell you that I think you should celebrate and take a day off of worrying about other people's struggles, because at any given moment on any given day since the beginning of existence, there's always been something to be sad about. And There's always something to be happy about. But in order for us to remain happy and healthy in this world, we need to be able to check out of the bad and just be in our own world. So you deserve that day.
Well, thank you.
And you deserve that day more than just on your birthday, but especially on your birthday, you deserve that day.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. Adar, you are in Israel. You are a social activist. You and I have had some incredible conversations in the past. What is the sentiment where you are right now?
Challenging. On the Israeli side, we've had, I don't know the exact number now, but I think over 3,000 rockets have been shot into Israel the past 10 days or maybe even less. Mm-hmm. We've had riots in multiple cities, both by Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis in multiple cities around Israel. Mm-hmm. Rocket fire is something we've dealt with in the past. These riots, they're creating a rift between our Arab and Jewish community is quite new, and it's troubling. Mm. That being said, Israelis are used to this, and if you go out, you'll see there's still people at the clubs. There's still people having fun. People are in the streets dancing. So it takes more than this to dampen our spirits. But, no one's happy about what's going on right now.
Right. Absolutely. Dar, we last week, the American media was really scrutinized by a lot of people because CNN, MSNBC, and all the major media outlets weren't really covering the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And they got in a lot of hot water because people are like, well, why aren't you talking about this? This is a really big conflict that's taking place. I'm sure, in Israel, it's, of course, all over the news and all over media. You talked about 3,000 rockets that were shot into Israel. You were in Galilee, so those rockets were fired where towards Tel Aviv. Where are those targets?
They were shot from Gaza by Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, which is a terror organization within Gaza, but primarily Hamas, which is the governing body there. Yeah. The majority of them were shot at southern Israel, but a fair amount have been shot into central Israel, Tel Aviv. Yeah. Some even a little more north of Tel Aviv. I'm way up north. None were shot to the Galilee from Gaza, but a few were shot from Lebanon to the Galilee. None in my direction. There were no air raid sirens here. I didn't have to go for cover yet, so I'm grateful for that. Yeah. Yeah, so the majority in southern Israel, and then a fair amount in in central Israel. I'm probably, as long as Hezbollah, which is the terrorist organization that rules South Lebanon, as long as they don't get involved in this war, then I'll probably be okay.
Yeah.
And this is the Israeli side. Gazans currently have it, I'd say, a fair amount worse than what Israelis have it. Israel's dropped, I don't know the exact number, but I would say right now, around 1,000, if not more, airstrikes in Gaza. Our airstrikes are a fair amount more powerful than their rockets, and we're lucky to have a missile defense system. We have something called the Iron Dome.
That's right.
It intercepts rockets as they come. I think the rockets right now have killed around, I don't know the exact number, but I would say under 10 Israelis. That being said, many more injured, and it causes PTSD to people who need to wake up at night and run to bunkers. Like it's terrifying.
Sure.
But Gazans definitely have been hit harder because they don't have a defense system. It's more densely populated there, and our missiles are a fair amount stronger.
Right.
One distinction, and this is important, is Israel's striking, and I'm against Israel's retaliation in Gaza. I'm in the minority opinion, but I don't think that's what we should be doing. But it is important to clarify that Israel is making an effort to maximize infrastructural damage and damage to Hamas. So they want to destroy Hamas infrastructure and Hamas personnel, and they want to do that while minimizing civilian harm. That being said, Hamas infrastructure is built within Gaza. It's very densely populated. Civilians are being killed, but our intention is to minimize civilian harm. Hamas, on the other hand, is aiming to maximize civilian harm. So the more civilians they could kill, the better. So in one sense, there's a power dynamic, right? So one side is obviously more powerful.
That's right.
And there's no like similarity in how much power one side has compared to the other. But on the other side, there's a difference in intention, right? So we have more power, and I think because we have more power, we should bear more responsibility. But it's not as simple as breaking it down into power dynamics, because our intention is to minimize civilian harm, while theirs is to maximize civilian harm. So that needs to be understood in the greater context of what's going on right now.
Adar, I read a number today. It said 200 Palestinians have been killed. 52 have been children. There was this one family where 10 of their family members were murdered, but through the airstrikes, they were killed during the airstrikes. And there's this one kid that was sitting. He's an orphan because he lost all his family members. I watched something like that. For me, look, I'm not an Arab. I have never been to Palestine. I've never been to Israel. I am on the side of peace and progress, and I feel like you and I see eye to eye on that. That we both want peace and progress. I mean, for you, God, you live in the heart of the conflict. It's a lot easier for people who reside in the United States, or who don't reside in the area that you guys reside, to have all kinds of comments. What I'm trying to understand is what my understanding of the flare up is that it all started because the Israeli army marched into the Al-Aqsa Mosque and started cutting out the speaker wires because the prayers were coming in conflict to an announcement or an event that was taking place on the Israeli side, while the Muslim prayers were happening in Al-Aqsa. Am I understanding this correctly?
No, I don't think that's what happened. I haven't heard that. That doesn't sound right. But Israel did storm Al-Aqsa. It's hard to know where this started, because this really started 100 years ago, right? We've been in conflict for 100 years, so we could go all the way back. But what created this most recent wave of tension? There's two distinct things that have happened.
Okay.
Well, maybe even more. There's a few things playing at each other. But one, there's a neighborhood called Sheikh Jarrah, and that's a neighborhood in East Jerusalem that a few Palestinians are being evicted from their homes, and Jews are moving in their place. And this is this is seen as a great injustice, and rightfully so. Many Palestinians are upset about this.
Yeah.
Also, Palestinians in the West Bank were meant to have elections for the first time in 15 years, and they were canceled. Which is, there's been a few times they've said they'll have elections and then they cancel them. So I think that added to the frustration. Then there was also an incident where a bunch of Arabs, Palestinians from East Jerusalem, indiscriminately beat up a Jewish Israeli and filmed it on TikTok.
I'm sorry. What happened? Sorry.
A bunch of Palestinians from East Jerusalem just started beating up Jews in East Jerusalem and filming it and putting it on TikTok.
Oh wow, I haven't even heard that here.
Yeah. So this was the first act of actual physical violence, right? It's possible they were reacting to Sheikh Jarrah, right? But this was the first act of physical violence in this escalation. When that went viral on TikTok, a group of settler Israelis came to Jerusalem and started indiscriminately beating up Palestinians in retaliation.
Yeah.
So you started having these two mobs in Jerusalem really acting like hooligans. And that kind of triggered the escalation to the point where there was Palestinians on Temple Mount, which is on that sits Al-Aqsa, supposedly rioting and throwing stones at Israeli police. Israeli military then stormed Al-Aqsa, which is also a clear escalation, right? So we're constantly, the defense Israel always takes is, they act this way, we responded. For me, I'm not so quick to excuse what Israel does, because I don't think that any response is by default justified, even if somebody else is acting violently. So even if there were rioters on Al-Aqsa Mosque, it's very clear that storming Al-Aqsa is going to continue to escalate the conflict. And I don't think it was a necessary escalation, right? So the Israeli military did storm Al-Aqsa because there were rioters hiding in there. That being said, we would have probably not been where we are today had Israel, been the adult in the room and said, you know what, we're not going to storm Al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa tensions are high. We'll de-escalate it in a different manner. That's not the path Israel went down. And I think it's fair to be critical of Israel for not essentially being the adult in the room, being the people in power. After we stormed Al-Aqsa, Hamas became furious over that and shot rockets into Israel. They shot rockets at Jerusalem and a few other cities. Israel then started responding very harshly with airstrikes on Gaza. Our airstrikes got Hamas to take it to the next level, and then Hamas shot rockets all over Israel, including Tel Aviv. And then the escalation just continued, and now we're in full-fledged bombardment of one another.
Adar, you brought up a point about that Israel should have been the adult in the room. There's a lot of conversation here, and there's a lot of talk, but on both sides, by the way, whether you're Jewish or not, is that the reason that Israel decided to go and strike and basically just give into the conflict is because Bibi Netanyahu, who's been brought on corruption charges, is using this as a form of distraction, from his own charges that, because the politics have been focused on him. So this has been an opportunity that he's used to distract from his own political, fallout or whatever. He's trying to use this as a distraction. Is that a conversation that's happening, or is that truth to some extent?
Yeah, so I've been hearing that. First of all, I see a bunch of people in the chat from the Sulha community, so I just want to give them a shout out. Yes. I recognize some of those names. Good to see. I just got off a 2-hour live stream that I did on my channel. Yeah. And at the end, I dropped the link to yours. So.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much.
The party continues.
Wow.
Does Benjamin Netanyahu have something to gain from this? Yes. There's two things that I could think of. One, currently, he failed to form a coalition, and what it means to form a coalition, it's complex, but Israel has like a British-like parliamentary government system where essentially it got to the point where another in opposition to Bibi got the opportunity to try to form a government. And in order to form a government, you need to have a coalition of enough parliamentary members in order for it to work. And one of Bibi's opponents got the opportunity to build a government, but in order for him to succeed, he would have needed an Israeli Arab party. And there's actually never been a coalition made with Israeli Arab parties. It would have been a first. And this opposition would have needed to make a coalition with an Israeli Arab party. Some are saying that there's something conspiratorial here, and Bibi needed tensions to rise between Arabs and Jews, and maybe that would make the coalition fall apart. That's one way to look at it. I think something that is perhaps more likely is generally when we are in conflict, we're at war, people kind of solidify around their leader, and he perhaps saw that this could make him more popular. Am I going to say that that's exactly why this got to where it is? No, because there's many factors at play here. Bibi didn't tell Hamas to shoot rockets at Israel, right? Right. Bibi didn't tell the Palestinians to beat up Jews and film it on TikTok. So there's a series of events. Is it possible that Bibi then saw this as an opportunity and the retaliation to Gaza is opportunistic? It's possible, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's possible. Mm-hmm. Hamas also has something to gain here. Every time Hamas engages with Israel, they gain popularity both in Gaza and the West Bank and internationally. So it seems like both our governments have something to gain from this conflict with one another, and the people are the ones who are losing. And that's often how it is in these situations.
Right. And that's always the case, right, Adar? That's always the case. I was having a conversation with an uncle of mine. He resides in Dubai. And, we were having this conversation, and I said, a lot of, if I'm Muslim, and as a Muslim person, I kind of step back and I'm just like, all right, well, if we're going to talk about, this whole Jew and Muslim thing, then how is it that the Khalij countries, your Saudis, your Emiratis, your Qataris, your Kuwaitis, who are also Muslim brethren, were supposed to be of Palestinians, that they never step up and they never just like, hey guys, how can we find a way to make this work? How can we find a way to have this as a two-state solution? They stay out of the conversation entirely. And, because what was it? Under the Trump administration, Israel and UAE did a deal for the first time in many, many years, right? So that you look at something like that and you're like, okay, so this is clearly not about religion right now. This is not about religion, okay? I believe, Adar, at the end of the day, it is about dollars and cents. That's what it's about. It is not about being a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian. It's not. When you're on that level of dealing with billions and trillions of dollars, it's the messaging that is used to create the conflict the way that they have created and the way things are going down right now. I look at that and I'm just like, okay, well, Emirates and Israel, cut a deal. So clearly, it's not a Muslim and Jew issue. Then I look at this whole thing with Palestine and what's happening now. Then how is it that none of the Khalij countries ever step up and help their fellow Muslim brethren out? Because I feel like they have really nothing to gain from the conflict. So they just step back and they're just like, we have no money to gain. I don't know. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that up until recently, the rest of the Middle East was not in a position to do much because their policy, their stance on the issue was, we do not recognize Israel, we do not normalize ties with Israel. Well, you're not in a position to really negotiate or mediate a peace deal if you don't recognize one of the parties in the peace deal. So the Abraham Accords, which is really the peace deals that Trump helped administer between Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, and I believe it was Morocco as well, and ties are warming up with Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. This was all a positive development because what it essentially does is it allows other nations, other Middle Eastern nations, to start to be involved in the process. Now, is it possible? I do know that UAE did convene with other Middle Eastern nations to see what they can do about this current uprising. So it would be interesting to see if they can get involved and help de-escalate. That'd be cool. Is the reason Saudi Arabia and other countries not doing more is because they don't have something to gain? Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why they're warming up to Israel is because they understand that in warming up to Israel, they do have something to gain. So I think that the peace deals between UAE and Israel is not because the people in UAE love Israel or vice versa. It's just that we understand that it's better for both our nations if we have peace with one another, trade agreements, traveling, and all that. So there's
Yep.
always, a foreign policy generally comes down to personal and national interests of each nation, not so much altruism or wanting to be friends with somebody for the greater good. That's generally not what drives it.
Yeah, Dar, I think for me, it's like, when so here's the truth. Most of my friends are Jewish in America. I mean, that's just the kind of the truth of it. And we sit down and we talk about the conflict that's taking place and has been taking place in Israel Palestine. And I feel like the constant conflict just keeps flaring up, keeps adding more fuel to the fire, where it doesn't give peace a chance or peace an opportunity. Do you feel that the leaders on both sides, Abbas on the Palestinian side and, of course, Bibi on the Israeli side, do you think they're both bad leaders for their people?
Yes,
They're
straight
both,
up, they're
they're,
both bad.
yeah.
There's three governments. There's Hamas, there's the Palestinian Authority,
Mhm.
and there's Likud, which is Bibi Netanyahu's party. All three are bad. They're not the party that. I mean, I don't want to say never, but likely these are not the parties that are going to help us bring peace to the land.
Yeah.
It's easier to replace Likud because we have a democracy. We can vote for somebody else.
Yeah.
Is it possible to replace the Palestinian Authority and Hamas? That's probably a much greater challenge. What I think is if we have an Israeli leader that is dedicated to really solving this, then we could bring both the PA and Hamas to the negotiating table.
Yeah.
Many people think you can't negotiate with Hamas because they're determined to wipe Israel off the map. It's true that they haven't been shy in their aspirations to destroy Israel.
Yeah.
But I do think that they too are acting in their own best interest, and them wanting to wipe Israel off the face of the map might be partially ideology that they truly believe in. But I think if push came to shove and they saw it as more beneficial to them to accept Israel, then they
Yeah.
would accept that deal.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's the case with
Dar,
Hamas.
a lot of people make an argument that the reason Hamas exists is because Palestine doesn't have any other way to protect itself, because it doesn't have a military, it doesn't have the kind of powerful infrastructure the way Israel does, and that's why Hamas exists, and Hamas, fills that kind of void. But how can possibly, and look, I'm asking, I'm making a big request here, and please, feel free to not answer this question if it's too big of a question. But how, first of all, just like you, I believe in a two-state solution. People who say Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth are horrible people, and people who say that Palestinians should be wiped off the face of the earth are also horrible people. I believe that there absolutely needs to be a two-state solution, and that's the only way. A lot of folks talk about, like, well, how is Palestine supposed to defend itself if it doesn't even have Hamas, or if it doesn't even have that? How's it going to protect itself? So how can Hamas be removed from the equation in order for Palestine to A, be recognized as a state, and B, have its own military defense if it needs to defend itself? I mean, the Gazans are just kind of packed. I mean, what is it, like the unemployment is something like 75%?
I don't know the numbers, but I don't think it's that high. But I've heard that youth unemployment amongst young men in the West Bank is at like 40-50%. This was a few years ago. I don't know the numbers in Gaza.
Yeah.
Now, about my stance on two-state solution, I would support a two-state solution, but that's not the only solution I would support. I would also support variations of a one-state solution. I would support a federation, which kind of keeps the land as one, but turns it into many little states, kind of like the United States. Mm-hmm. Or a confederation, which kind of makes it like their European Union, where it's two separate entities with open borders and whatnot. So there's different variations of solutions that I would I can support. But Palestinians, if Palestine becomes a sovereign nation, then they should have a right to a military, for sure.
Mhm.
But at the same time, Palestinians and the international community needs to acknowledge that Israel isn't going to let them have a military if they are calling for Israel's destruction. Like and again, Palestinians have every right to have a military. They don't need to accept Israel trying to, keep them weak. But it's not an uncommon position amongst Palestinians and amongst Palestinian leadership that Israel needs to cease to exist. So why would a country of a people with such a difficult past, who have been genocided and persecuted, why would they just trust to let this other nation build a strong military to defend itself when they don't think it's going to be used for defense, but rather to attack? The borders of Israel are not wide, right? We're in a hostile environment surrounded by enemies.
Right.
This is a truth that the international community needs to grapple with. This is the truth. To think that Israel is not going to look out for their own existential, to stop an existential threat. Of course they're going to, and we shouldn't expect anything less of Israel. That being said, there are many things we could point to that Israel does that are not needed for Israel's security, that are still done for other political reasons. And it's not that Israel is free of guilt. No, there's a lot of reasons to condemn and criticize Israel. But if we're not going to acknowledge that Israel is in a hostile neighborhood, surrounded by enemies, with people who are not sharing their aspirations for the destruction of Israel, that's one of the reasons why Israel doesn't really take the international community, because they don't seem to understand the tricky situation they're in.
Yeah. Adar, I hear you, man. I always think about, I feel like it goes back. I feel like even if you have, like, let's say if you have two progressive, leaders on both sides, on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side, but if the majority of the people are thinking about wiping the other one out, then what could the leaders possibly do? I mean, what kind of, they would need the backing of their own people in order to make progressive or peaceful moves. But if their people don't support it, how can they?
Good leadership has the ability to inspire people. So most people are not, it's not that most people aren't dogmatic. I think most people have some pretty deep dogmas, but most of these dogmas can be changed and reformed given good and inspiring leadership. That's one. Two, people are products of their environment. So Palestinians wanting to destroy Israel is very much a result of certain environmental factors, many of which we would need good Palestinian leadership to change. Better education system, certain cultural changes, better socioeconomics, better infrastructure.
Yes.
But by the way, socioeconomics, infrastructure, and all that are things that Israel greatly contributes to as well. So there are certain things that Israel can do to change the environment in which Palestinians live. You change the environment, you change the people. And Israel hasn't done anything to positively change the environment of the Palestinians. Our military occupation of the West Bank causes Palestinians immense emotional harm, and a population who is constantly being harmed by another population is not open to having peace with them. So the extremism we see in Palestinian society is not solely a result of Israel, but it's certainly contributed to by Israel and Israel's policies.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, look, it takes two to tango, right? It's not like, it takes two to tango. I think what I'm trying to understand, Adar, is that, it's very interesting that, the story, the narrative that you're telling me versus the narrative that's here. I have, I don't know if you saw the protest that took place in London this past weekend, where a lot of Palestinians and a lot of, supporters took it to the streets, and And one of the videos I saw was really disturbing. One of them was chanting, death to Israel. One was chanting, rape their daughters. Now, when I watch stuff like that, Adar, it fucking embarrasses the shit out of me as a Muslim, as a human being, and especially also as a woman. I can never imagine, one group of people wishing rape and death on another group of people because you don't like their policies or because you've had conflict. Like, nobody wants that shit. I don't want to see that. I don't ever want to wish that on my Jewish brothers and sisters, or vice versa be wished on me. That it's so fucked up, So it's like I always feel like it's always the extreme assholes from two sides that just seize these opportunities and just rise up and say the most vile fucking things. And then it's like, see, there you go. See, these people, they want to kill us and they want to rape our daughters. And other people are like, see, they're killing us and they're murdering us. And it's like, dude, where are the sensible people? Where are the people who are the moderates and who sit in the middle? So then it goes back to the conversation of, well, who are the people who elected their leaders? So the people who elected their leaders also had the same thoughts. If their leaders are so fucking jacked up that they chose the people that matched their mentality. We had a problem of that with Trump being elected in America. More Americans stepped in and were like, we don't want this man as president of the United States. He is doing us more harm than good. He needs to be out of here. Okay. Do you feel that is the same thing that's happening on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side, as far as leadership goes currently?
I kind of lost track of the question.
I guess my question is, the reason that these kind of leaders are in place, like you said, like Bibi's in place and even Abbas is in place, is because these people have been elected by folks who hold these kind of crazy extreme point of views and want to basically eliminate the other.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, about your point about the extremism you've seen in protests in Europe and the United States, that's very unfortunate to see. Jews around the world are very scared right now because of the backlash. I don't even want to call it backlash because they don't deserve any harm towards them. They're not Israel. They're not Israel's government, and nobody deserves to be indiscriminately attacked for their religion. People who are harming Jews right now in the name of Palestine are harming the Palestinian cause. Yeah. So if you care about Palestine, do not indiscriminately attack Jews. Mm-hmm. This is not how we liberate the Palestinian people.
I agree.
In addition to that, attacking Jews indiscriminately actually strengthens Zionism, because one of the foundations of Zionism is the idea that Jews need a place to be safe. Mm-hmm. And many people say Jews can be safe in many countries around the world. And this is proof that, well, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah.
So not to mention it's just morally reprehensible to attack Jews for being Jewish. So stop it.
That's right.
When it comes to leaders, I mean, it's a little bit more challenging because Gazans haven't had an election since 2007, and West Bank Palestinians haven't had an election since like 2005 or 2006 or something like that. Mm. They don't have an ability to change their leaders unless they have some kind of a revolution. This will require an immense sacrifice of Palestinian life. And I don't know if Israel would let Palestinians topple Hamas, but Hamas has all the guns, the citizens don't. Israel would not let the citizens topple the PA because Israel is in coordination with the PA. Mm-hmm. There's not a clear path for what Palestinians can actually do because they don't choose their leaders. When it comes to how Israelis vote, we have too many elections. We've had 4 elections the past 2 years because we haven't been able to maintain a functioning government. But the reasons why people vote for right-wing parties in Israel is not because they hate Palestinians per se.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they feel like it's the right-wing leaders that are going to keep Israel safe long term. So they're doing it for security. It's not, there's definitely hate, there's definitely racism. I'm not trying to minimize that it exists,
Yeah.
but that's not, it's very possible if you were to take all the hate out of Israel, Bibi would still win elections. He would win not because there's hate, but because there's fear. Fear often breeds hate, but if Israelis had nothing to fear, Bibi wouldn't win.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't hate, he might still win. Fear is the driving factor here.
Right. Right. What I'm trying to understand is why this need to kick out 6 families in Sheikh Jarrah and have the settlers come in that has set off this entire, this recent flare up. Is there not enough space or room in current Israel for the folks to be sent off and to be settled that is going to cause this conflict? Like, why? What is the motivation? It's just to kick people out of their homes? Like, what is that about?
So it's not that there's no space. It's partial motivation to make that neighborhood Jewish, but it's a bit more complex than that. That land, the land that the Palestinians are being evicted from, was purchased from Jewish associations in the 1910s, I believe. Sometime in the 1910s, it was purchased by Jewish associations. It's also a place that has some historically Jewish, some Jewish history connected to it. So
Okay.
Jews purchased it in the 1910s. In 1948, when we had the 48 War, Jordan took over that area,
Yeah.
kicked the Jews out. It was then under Jordanian control.
Mm-hmm.
In 1956, Jordan took some Palestinian refugees that were kicked out of their homes in 48 from Israel proper.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan placed Palestinians in those homes in 1956, and they've been living in those homes since 1956.
Okay.
The courts decided, they passed a law in the 70s, I believe, that allowed for Jews to reclaim property that belonged to them prior to 48. Okay.
Right.
Now, what makes this controversial is that Palestinians cannot use this same law to reclaim property that they lost in 48. So there's an inequity in how this law is written. Now, the defense of that would be like, yeah, Palestinians, they're not citizens. They want to destroy Israel. Why would we give them land back if they want to destroy us, right? So that's like the counter to that. But it's legitimate to not be okay with the fact that there's an inequity here. The organization that now legally has the rights to that land are not the original Jewish associations that bought it. The rights were passed over by those associations to a far-right group of settlers who have plans to clear Palestinians out of East Jerusalem and make it Jewish. The Palestinians who have been living in those homes since 1956 were now told they need to start paying rent to the far-right settlers. And if they don't, they get evicted. Now, the Palestinians living there were granted as a protected residency, meaning they get to stay, but they need to pay rent. But the protected residence is the person who's lived there their whole lives. Once they pass away, then their offspring will not get to remain to live there. They will then be evicted. Palestinians saw this as a major injustice. A, that they need to pay a far-right settler group that wants to kick Palestinians out of East Jerusalem. And B, that their children won't get to stay in the homes that they've been living in since 1956. They refuse to pay this rent because in paying rent, they're legally acknowledging that they own the home. They decided to continue to fight it. That not paying rent got the courts to order an eviction. There still is a court case that's going to determine what's happening. But that's essentially what's going on, right? So social media, mainstream media generally does not give you these details, this nuance. Obviously, it's more complicated than most people present it to be. I personally think we should not be evicting people. And I don't think it's fair to expect Palestinians to pay rent to far-right settlers who want to kick them off the land. The same way it's not fair to make Jews pay rent to Palestinians who refuse to accept Israel's right to exist, right? So it's an injustice. And the fact that the law should be equitable. If Jews can claim property from prior to 48, Palestinians should be able to do the same. So there definitely is legitimate criticism for what's happening here. But it's not as clear cut as people make it seem, and just say, Israel is deciding to ethnically cleanse Palestinians because they want the land for themselves. Obviously, it's more complex than that. That being said, again, there is definitely room for critique here.
Adar, you said that that land was that area was seized by Jordan in 1956, correct? Though where is that the Sheikh Jarrah area you're talking about that was seized? Is that what you're referring to?
It was seized by Jordan in 1948, and in 1956, it was Palestinians were allowed to move into that home. They gave up their refugee status if they were given those homes. Like there was a certain deal they got. Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are the dates. I might be messing up the dates, but I did look into them. That's what I recall.
Yeah. So I think what I'm trying to understand is that if those properties were under the Jordan jurisdiction, then why do the residents there owe rent to the like you mentioned, far right?
Right. That's true. So I forgot.
So why do they owe?
In 1967, Israel took that land back.
I see.
Yeah, and in 1967, that's when we took the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Many Jews see that as a great day when Jerusalem became united. It wasn't split between East and West Jerusalem, and that we finally got control over our ancestral homeland of Judea and Samaria. So 1967 is seen, and that essentially is when people say end the occupation, generally they're talking about West Bank and East Jerusalem, what we took in 1967. So since 1967, it's been Israel's land.
So since 1967, these families have been residing there. So I guess, and then what? Since 1967, the case is being fought in courts if these people should be evicted and should be paying rent. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, they said they need to pay rent to the far right settler group, and if not, then they get evicted. Correct.
I see. So the rest of the residents, the rest of the Palestinians that reside there, so they're paying rent, which is why they have not been evicted?
No, what's only come to question, it's not the entire neighborhood was not given to the settler group. It's I believe it's only like 5 homes or something that's contested right now.
Families, right?
But there is an attempt to continue to this group that now has rights over some of the houses. Their goal is to make that neighborhood Jewish. They're not shy in that aspiration either. Like that, that's what they're attempting to do. But I think what's in question now is something like 5 houses.
Right. So like that video, which I'm sure you've seen, the Palestinian woman in a hijab, and she's saying, Jacob, she's like, Yaqub, you're moving into my house. And he's like, if I'm not going to do it, then somebody else is going to do it. And that was really, that video has went viral and people are watching it and they're like, oh, that is such a crazy logic. Oh, if you're not going to take it, then somebody else is going to take over. And, and look, I didn't even know that backstory until I spoke to you, because that's even mentioned here. Like, we don't know, like what, for the first time, Adar, and I've never heard this word being used before towards Israel, is that Israel is an apartheid state. This is the first time I'm hearing of that narrative. As an Israeli residing in Israel, how does that make you feel? And how much truth is that to that word?
So I'm personally not triggered by Israel being called an apartheid state. Most Israelis don't take it too lightly, and most Israel supporters around the world, Jewish Israel supporters of the world, don't take it too lightly.
Yeah.
Apartheid is not like a clear-cut black and white definition. It's a quite complex legal definition that that has some level of interpretation to it.
Okay.
I have never done an in-depth scholarly read on apartheid and how it's applied, but I do know that there is a fair amount of academics that do view Israel as apartheid. Mm-hmm. I understand what they mean by it. Mm-hmm. I do know that there are some scholars that make a reverse claim. I'm trying to host a debate on this on my show. Regardless of if we want to call Israel an apartheid or not, to Palestinians, it feels awfully similar to apartheid, living under another nation's military rule, not being equal to Israelis. Whether you want to call it apartheid or not, it doesn't make much of a difference in my opinion, because it's just as bad if you're Palestinian. Mm-hmm. So I view it as an unnecessary semantic argument. It might have some legal implications, but in terms of engaging in dialogue and progressing certain ideas forward, it's the semantic of what you want to call it is less important than the actual reality, the morality behind that reality, and what we need to do to change it. So that's kind of how I like to look at it.
Yeah. I want to take a break from asking questions because there's a lot of chatter happening here, and I want to be respectful of both sides because this is such a sensitive topic and this is a sensitive time. Some of the comments, man, I just get scared to even read them because this kind of stuff just makes me want to cry because I just don't want to see death and carnage anywhere. Okay, here we go. Truth to Power said their courts don't accept Palestinian paperwork. There's a lot of Adar, ever since I've spoken to you, my view on Zionism has changed because you consider yourself a Zionist, and yet in America, and I think I would say that even in majority of the Muslim world, because there's this conversation that not all Jews are Zionists, as if being a Zionist is something bad or horrific or extremist. But you have given me a very different perception and a different idea of what Zionism really is. So why are some people just kind of stuck on this, like, extremist Zionists? But then you're like, no, but I'm a Zionist, and you're a good dude. You want peace on both sides. You believe in a two-state solution, and you're a very reasonable human being. So why? Why is that? Why does Zionism have this negative connotation attached to it?
Yeah, there's a huge misconception and difference in how Zionists define Zionism and how anti-Zionists define Zionism. So anti-Zionists will view Zionism as something akin to Jewish supremacy, while Zionists view it as simply the right for Jewish self-determination on our ancestral homeland, right? It's tricky because Zionists should have the right to define what Zionism means, not anti-Zionists. That being said, what Zionism has meant in practice to Palestinians very much seems to be like it's anti-Palestinian, right? Because for Jews to self-determination on our ancestral homeland, it means we're going to control a portion, if not all, of Palestine. So why would a Palestinian accept Zionism if it gives us control over their land, right? That's how Palestinians view it. So Palestinians view Zionism as inherently anti-Palestinian, while we just view it as us being able to self-determine on our ancestral homeland. So this is kind of where, and not all forms of Zionism need to contribute to any form of harm to Palestinians. There's many different implementations and variations of Zionism, but how it's carried out in practice, it hasn't been good for Palestinians. So when Jews say they're Zionist, it's them supporting Jewish self-determination, their ability to be free and secure on their ancestral homeland. Doesn't sound controversial, right? That's what Jews who are Zionists believe. Palestinians, when they hear Zionism, they think that's a Jew who supports ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and oppression, right? My solution to the way we reconcile these two things is to understand that Zionism does not need to be harmful to Palestinians, and Jews have a right to self-determination.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, we need to acknowledge that how our self-determination has played out has been harmful to Palestinians. So we need to hold both these truths simultaneously. And what I do is I don't even use the term Zionist because I think it's an unnecessary term. I support Jewish self-determination and I support Palestinian self-determination. I support Kurdish self-determination. I support self-determination of people all around the world. It doesn't require a special term to describe that self-determination. And as we see, the term Zionist creates immense confusion and immense debate on what it actually means, that we spend hours and immense amounts of energy on having a debate on. Again, it's a semantic debate over a term rather than real world things, real world problems and their solutions. So I don't even say I'm a Zionist. No, I just support Jewish self-determination, right? It's such a clear-cut, easier way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's, when we say Zionist, they view that as horrible. We could try to educate them what it means, and we should, but a much easier way is to not use the term, just explain to them what self-determination means to us, how we could do it in a way that's not harmful to them, and how ultimately we could live together as brothers and sisters on this land together.
Yes, 100%. Swazi has a solution, which I might second here. Is I think we should do forced vaccinations of MDMA on the entire region for the next 20 years in order to avoid the next world war. If you're talking about good drugs, Swazi, I will not turn those down. Send some this way as well. We have people in America that would also need some of the MDMA. I am all about it. We're going to start wrapping up soon because I want to be mindful of your time. Chai Guy wants to know, what is Mona's background? I am Pakistani. That's what I am. I can tell you that, Pakistanis and I guess I would say non-Palestinian Muslims get very worked up around the Israel-Palestine conflict, and rightfully so. People have very high emotions, and people are very tied into their identities about being Muslim or being Jewish, and people get very, very juiced up about it. But I'm also an artist. I like to step back and just kind of, which is why I'm having this dialogue and having this conversation with Adar. And I appreciate you guys chiming in here and giving your opinions. I know some people are getting very worked up about it, and I respect that. People are absolutely have the right to feel how they want to feel. I guess, Adar, I wanted to actually ask you, this is a little bit more of a personal question. Your idea to decide to move further up north, was that because of all the rockets that get launched closer to or into Tel Aviv and possibly getting, is that what you're...
No, not at all. No, I mean, right now I'm in the safest place because we're engaging with Gaza. If we were to engage with Hezbollah, I would be in the worst place. I'm 20 minutes away from Lebanon, and they have way more sophisticated rocket capabilities than Hamas. I hope we never have another engagement with Hezbollah, but it's not going to be fun for northern Israel.
Right.
Now, my consideration for moving up north was COVID times. There was the city was no fun during COVID. Mm-hmm. It's much less fun, but same price. Didn't seem worth it anymore. I wanted to take at least 6 months where I can focus entirely on Sulha in order to build it. Yeah. So I wanted a place that's quiet, and because I was going to do it full time, I wanted to be able to cut my expenses substantially. Yeah. Tel Aviv is super expensive, the north not so much. Mm-hmm. So I decided to come to a quieter place where I could really focus on my stuff.
Got it. So you can invest some in crypto. Is that what's happening? Just invest in some Dogecoin. It's a big deal over here right now.
I don't know if I told you this. I actually that's my day job. I work in crypto.
Oh, you do? Oh my God, we've never talked about this.
That's what I've done the past 3 years, and I took a 6-month break in
Got
order
it.
when I moved up north. But just last week, I came back into the crypto. So yeah, my day job is blockchain technology, and then
Got
on my
it.
free time, I'm doing this stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
so definitely, I'm big on crypto, but I don't own any Dogecoin.
No Dogecoin. I
I
got some
I
Doge.
might be making a mistake. I don't know. Like yeah, maybe I should get a little bit just in case.
Well, you're in the business, so you just invest other people's money and not yours. Is that it?
No, I don't invest other people's money. I hold. I invest. But it's just never Doge has never been super appealing to me because it started as a joke. It doesn't have like super um, promising fundamentals. So I probably have close to 10 different currencies that I hold. Just none of them are Doge.
Yeah.
What I do is I don't invest other people's money, and I generally don't give investment advice either because what do I know at the end of the day? But I help companies with marketing, community management, strategy, business development,
Got it.
all sorts of different things that come down to
Yeah.
interpersonal connection.
Yeah.
Because here's really what it is: the the people who are smart enough to understand Bitcoin or blockchain
Yeah.
aren't charismatic enough to explain it. So
Right.
I'm somewhere in between. I don't understand it like the geniuses, the coders, and all that. Like I don't understand it that depth, but I definitely have a good grasp of blockchain technology and how to explain it to others. And explaining things is, I guess, one of my strong points. So I'm kind of in between. I can grasp it and explain it, so that that's kind of been my role in the blockchain space. And it's great because every company I work for, I get bonuses in tokens, so it helps me build my portfolio because I get tokens from all these different companies that I've worked for. So that's fun.
That's awesome. Uh, Chai Guy said, "Love my Pakistanis." Well, thank you very much. Sending you love back. And then he also asked, what did he ask? He said, "Is it too late to invest in it?" I don't think so. Go right ahead.
So yeah, what I would say is, what I tell people is, it is a high risk asset class. It's
Yeah.
high risk, high reward, right? So I would say invest only what you're comfortable losing. Don't take a loan. Don't take a mortgage out just to invest. Invest what you're okay losing. But no, I don't think it's too late. Bitcoin right now is like $48,000 after a big drop. It was 60,000 last week.
Mm.
But Bitcoin can hit $1 million within the next few years. Like that's not outside the realm of possibility.
Right.
So it seems like $50,000 Bitcoin, you missed the bus. But if Bitcoin goes to 1 million, then well, that's still 20x on what you're going to invest now. Will it hit 1 million? Impossible to know.
Yeah.
Is it within the realm of possible? Without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Adar, we'll come right back and then we'll wrap up. A lot of people are very upset at President Biden at the moment that he is not taking a proper stance and not calling for a ceasefire, and telling Israel to do a ceasefire. And a lot of people are upset. What is the, I guess, how are people feeling about Biden? How are Israelis feeling about Biden, about, not calling for a ceasefire?
I don't know. I don't know what Israelis think about Biden. I guess they don't think about him too much, to be completely honest. I don't know if we should be mad at Biden. We should be mad at the Democratic Party because Biden doesn't really make any decisions. He's controlled by the party. He's like already losing his mind a little bit. So he's just an old man that's a placeholder. Like let's be honest. Let's be honest. He's not like sitting there and it's the Democratic Party.
Whole different episode, Adar.
Well, yeah, okay, but it's the Democratic Party that is deciding that they're going to support Israel through this. They're going to, I believe, they vetoed some kind of ceasefire resolution in the UN. I don't know the exact details.
That's correct.
And this just goes to show that Republicans and Democrats both are pretty damn supportive of Israel, and probably not for the right reasons. Yeah, it's there's a growing narrative that Democrats hate Israel. It's true that the younger generation are less supportive of Israel. But as you see, the Democratic establishment still very much is pro-Israel, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Adar, one last question and then we'll wrap up. If Hamas is taken out, and let's say Hamas is eliminated by whatever means it's eliminated, wouldn't that create a vacuum for Hezbollah to then move in, which is better armed and better even organized, I would say?
So if Hamas is taken out, it depends how they're taken out, but there is a good likelihood that if they're taken out, that it would create a power vacuum. That power vacuum won't be filled with Hezbollah because they don't have any, they don't have much influence over Gaza. They're a Lebanese terrorist group. What could happen is generally when there are power vacuums, those who have the most weapons and are best organized are the ones who are going to rise to power. It seems like after Hamas, if it's not Hamas, it very well may be the Islamic Jihad, which is considered a more extreme terrorist organization than Hamas. So it won't be Hezbollah, but it is possible that a power vacuum will be filled by someone more extreme than Hamas, for sure.
Right. So it's Hamas or something worse. Is that it?
It doesn't have to be. I mean, it's possible that there could be a situation where a more moderate government comes in, but there's no group right now in Gaza that has weapons, that has power, that has influence, that is more moderate than Hamas. You could say the Palestinian Authority, but they don't have any power in Gaza. So again, the people who fill power vacuums are those who have arms and organization. Those are all more extreme than Hamas. So it's a bit of an issue. A power vacuum probably at this moment won't be filled by someone positive. It would need to be artificially filled. Like Israel would need to. Israel either needs to work with Hamas to reform them, and I think most Israelis don't think it's possible. I disagree. I think it is. Or we work with a different group in Gaza and empower them to take over. By the way, that's what we did with Hamas, and it ended up not playing in our favor. Hamas was partially created by Israel because we wanted a group to be able to compete with the PLO, which is now the Palestinian Authority. So we tried this; it didn't really work. It's not easy. And then there's also a position that we just reoccupy Gaza. We send our troops in there. We destroy Hamas. That's a bloody and very long battle that would take months, and we would lose thousands, if not tens of thousands. Definitely thousands of Israeli. I don't see it being less than a few thousand Israeli soldiers, and tens of thousands of Gazans would die in that process. And I don't know if we could actually hold Gaza in a way that there wouldn't be constant terrorism. That's literally the bloodiest path we could take. Some people support that. I don't.
Yeah. Adar, this has been, a great conversation. But I guess the pain continues on both sides, and death and carnage continues, and the conflict continues. What are you hoping that gets resolved, either by this week or by next week, that will bring some level of normalcy, some level of peace, some level of quietness to this?
There are talks of a ceasefire. I think Israel, from what they said, they want a few more days. They're not done bombing Gaza. They feel like there's still something to be gained from more airstrikes. There's more targets they want to hit. But I heard that they're talking about Thursday. It's possible that Thursday we could put most of this behind us, but it's not really putting it behind us because the lives lost are lives lost. Their families will be carrying that pain for the rest of their lives. The renewed PTSD that the people of Gaza now have, and the people in Israel who had rocket shot at them have, this is something that will live with us for many years, if not a lifetime. And the mob violence we've seen is going to last with us for that to me might be the most concerning, because that's not something we've dealt with. Many Israelis have feared that we can't have peace with Palestinians. They say no matter what, they will always turn on us. Actually, in the chat, so you see Starhopper there. He's like a regular on our chat. Starhopper's position is we can never trust them. They will always turn on us. We cannot have peace with them. Starhopper's position, it's considered a more extreme position, but it's not so uncommon in Israel. So Starhopper's position just got strengthened by the mob violence we saw amongst Arabs. That position has definitely been strengthened. It now has more justification than ever before, unfortunately. Arabs living in Israel, who I'm sure have felt very safe the past 70 plus years, now, because they also experienced mob violence against them, now understand that Jews can turn on them. And as a minority group, that must be very scary. So the fear that this has created amongst our people will not only be used by the more extreme segments of our society to justify their lack of trust, but also there is a legitimate trust issue that's going to take a long time to rebuild. And us at Sulha, we're going to work to rebuild this trust.
Yeah. Adar, one last question, and then we'll wrap up. I wanted to ask you, the building that got taken down, that Israeli side claimed that had terrorists in it, had Hamas in it, that had BBC and Al Jazeera. It was the AP building that got taken down. How much truth is to that sentence that there was Hamas or there were terrorists that were hiding in that building, which is why that building was taken down? Because the narrative that is in the United States, and I guess what you would say in most Muslim countries or Muslim world, is that the reason they took that down is if you take out the journalists or the reporters, then there's not much left to report. I mean, if you're going to disarm them, then how the hell are they going to report on as to the airstrikes and the bombings that are taking place? What is your understanding of the situation?
I mean, we're kind of in a situation where it's like he said, she said kind of thing. Israel reports that there was that building was used as a Hamas intelligence headquarters, I believe, or that they were shooting rockets from the area. And I did hear that somebody who worked in the building confirmed it. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure. We just need to think of like what motive Israel would have. So Israel taking down a news center in order to stop news from being reported. It doesn't sound so likely if I'm to assess, because they might lose like one day of reporting. But the negative PR that taking down a media building would create is worse than what reporters can create by reporting facts on the ground. So if Israel's intention was to stop media reporting so they can't talk about all the horrible things Israel's doing in Gaza, if that was really Israel's intention, well, bombing a media building is the worst way to do that, because the whole world is talking about Israel bombing a media building. So it seems more likely that there was some Hamas operatives using that building for one thing or another, and they saw it as a worthy target. That narrative that they wanted to stop media doesn't really make much sense in my opinion.
Because you're saying it just makes it, Israelis look even worse. Like, oh, look, they took down the media building because, they don't want the truth reported. And it makes Israel look even worse.
Right, but taking down a media building is going to make Israel worse than them being able to continue to report the news. Like, that's been the major story. So if that was their logic, that's just bad logic, Whatever they would have reported isn't worse than Israel taking down a news building.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question here by Shy Guy. He said, is Adar's views a tiny minority in Israel, and does he face any backlash from extremists like Starhopper?
I am in the minority without a doubt.
Yeah.
How tiny, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
It also depends which views, because I don't fit in any specific box. Like I say things that very much, appeal to the left-wing segments of society, but not everything. Like I would say that my views are quite atypical, but the amount of Jews that, genuinely care about Palestinians and doing something to end the military occupation of the West Bank and really see Palestinians live a good and meaningful life. Yeah, that's the minority of Israelis. It doesn't come from a place of hate as much as it comes from a place of indifference. Most people are consumed with their own lives. They want what's best for them and their families. Mm-hmm. And they either don't think much of Palestinians or they view Palestinians as their enemies. So why would they care about them? There's some amount of hate, without a doubt, but the majority of Israelis don't hate Palestinians, and the majority don't care about them either. The majority are just indifferent and want to live their lives the best they can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of emotion here. There's a lot. Wow. I know we're talking about Star Hopper. So like you have Star Hopper, who's on the very right side of it. On that point of view. We have Truth to Power, who is on the other side, on the also very right side of the Palestinian point of view. He says, please don't delete my comments as Dar does on his lives. Please don't need the truth. I don't know. He's claiming that you've apparently deleted his.
We have a very straightforward moderation policy. You can share whatever view you want. We don't censor. But if you're engaging in personal attacks or hate, or spam, we delete comments.
Okay.
So Truth to Power, you're being disingenuous.
Yeah.
If you ever got your comment deleted on a video, it's because you were breaking clearly defined rules. We have all sorts of views on the show. We have people from the far left, the far right. We had a Kahanist on the show. We're trying to get a neo-Nazi on the show. We'll bring on a Hamas member on the show. We're not in the business of censoring views. And anybody, many people disagree with me, but most people who are honest actors would acknowledge that at least we do a good job at trying to get a wide diversity of opinion, and we're not into censorship. So Truth to Power, if you want truth to be in your name, you got to start telling the truth, bro.
Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't deleted any comments. I've just let everything run because I want people to feel like they can be heard and they can state their opinions. And but just like you said, I'm not as fancy as you, Adar. I don't have anybody moderating. I'm talking to you and I'm trying to moderate. So I'm trying to do multitask over here. But this has been a really fantastic conversation, Adar. And man, I just want everybody to be safe. I hope the ceasefire happens sooner than later. I hope the conflict goes down. I hope the love increases, the hate goes down. And I'm going to keep watching the situation pretty closely. But I'm glad that you moved up further north. But then you're telling me you're 20 minutes from not, God forbid, if Hezbollah decides to attack. So that's worrisome too, because I do consider you a friend and I don't want my friends harmed. So there's that.
I'll be okay. You don't need to be worried about me. Just hope for peace on the land.
Amen. Amen to that, my friend. Amen to that.
And Mona, have a great birthday. Really take the day off. Don't worry about everything going on in the world. We'll survive without you for a day.
Man, I appreciate that. Adar, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much. Get some sleep, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mona. Talk soon.
Take care. Thank you. That was my really good friend, Adar Weinreb. Man, the comments, I'm sorry, you guys, if I didn't get to all of the comments, because I think Star Hopper and Truth to Power legit just took over this chat. They're both very passionate. I respect both, your passions. I respect your opinions. I understand it's not a very simple situation where there's like, we snap our fingers and find solutions. I wish that was the case, but sadly, that is not the case here. Star Hopper, you are not an extremist to me. You're a passionate Zionist. That's who you are. And just like my friend Adar explained to us, there's a different spectrum of Zionism, and some may consider it as someone who is totally is completely on the extremist side, but clearly Adar does not feel that way, and he still considers himself a Zionist. Oh wow! Have you considered punctuation? Okay, all right. Now we're getting into punctuations and that whole thing. You guys, I really appreciate you guys engaging. I really appreciate you guys coming here. Thank you very much. Some people who assault Israeli Arabs. Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Israeli police are arresting the people who assault Israeli Arabs. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Mark Lee said, happy birthday. I am friends on both sides. Same here. Mark said, happy birthday, wonderful lady. Thank you very much. My birthday is tomorrow. Guys, if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can. You can go to youtube.com/Mona Sheikh and the word comedian. I know there was not a lot of comedy to be had today, because we are talking about a very sensitive current topic, but you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do live stream 5 days a week and bring on some really cool guests like Congresswoman Katie Hill. I've had interviews with comedians Margaret Cho and many other comics, and as well as really big change makers. So you can subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Mona's Comedy, and on Facebook at Mona Sheikh Comedian, as well as on TikTok. You guys, I will be back tomorrow with a brand new guest. Have a good evening. Keep love and prayers in your heart, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night.